My parents left my sister everything and told me I should be happy with memories until I found out what they were trying to hide from me. I'm 32M and my sister Emily is 35F. Our mom died last year and our dad passed 3 months ago. When the will was read, my parents left Emily everything. The house, the savings, the investments, my mom's jewelry. Well, I got a single line about keepsakes and memories. When I asked what the hell happened, my aunt told me I should be happy with memories and not make grief about money. I tried to swallow it until I found out there was a whole history they never told me about. We grew up in a small town in Ohio. Emily was the classic golden child, straight A student, stayed close to home, became a teacher, married a guy from our church, had 2 kids. My path was messy. I scraped through high school, went to a state college 2 hours away, moved to Chicago for work, bounced through a few jobs before landing in IT with a decent salary. I visited when I could, called often, but I wasn't physically there the way Emily was. When our mom got diagnosed with breast cancer 5 years ago, Emily stepped up in a huge way. She lives 10 minutes from her parents, so she did the everyday stuff. Rides to chemo, sitting with mom after treatments, grocery runs. Dad was still working then and terrified. I started driving back every couple weekends, used my PTO, did what I could, but I won't pretend I was there as much as Emily. Mom went into remission for a bit. Then the cancer came back harder. She died last November. Dad was a mess. We did the funeral, the casseroles, the family is everything speeches. In the middle of it, Dad told us, your mother and I took care of the paperwork. You two don't need to worry. I assumed that meant a basic 50-50 will. It never occurred to me they might see it differently. In March, Dad had a mild heart attack. He recovered, but it slowed him down. This summer, he got pneumonia and spiraled fast. He died in the hospital with me and Emily on either side of the bed. It felt like losing the last anchor. A week after the funeral, our Aunt Linda called and told us to come to Dad's lawyer's office for the reading of the will. I took a day off, drove down from Chicago, met Emily there. She seemed anxious, but kept saying, you know how they are. It's probably just split straight down. The lawyer, Henderson, had known my parents forever. He ran through the formalities, then got to the meat, the house, the car, the joint savings, the investment account, my mom's jewelry, all personal belongings not otherwise specified, and a remainder of the estate to our beloved daughter, Emily, in gratitude for her care and devotion. Then one line near the end. To our son, we leave our love, our pride, and the keepsakes and memories he may choose from items not otherwise specifically assigned. That was it. No percentage, no money, no property, just keepsakes and memories. Emily started crying. Henderson looked like he wanted to vanish. I just sat there thinking I must have misheard. When he finished, I asked, is there another document? Something else. He said this was the most recent will from 2 years ago, signed by both parents, witnesses in order, no codicils. We walked out into the parking lot and just stood there. Emily hugged me and kept saying, I'm so sorry, I had no idea. I asked if mom or dad had ever said anything to her about changing the will. She swore they hadn't said, if I'd known, I would have told you. That night at Aunt Linda's, I brought it up carefully, said I don't begrudge Emily getting more after everything she did, but I didn't expect to be cut out completely. Linda put her hand on mine and said, honey, your parents loved you very much, but Emily was here. She gave them grandbabies. She took care of them. It just made sense. You should be happy you had good parents at all. Some people don't. Be happy with the memories. That phrase stuck like a splinter, happy with memories. Over the next few days, I heard it over and over. Every time I tried to talk about the will, someone would say some version of, don't make this about money. And you had their love. Isn't that enough? I went back to Chicago with this knot in my chest. On paper, I'm not hurting. I pay my bills. I have savings. I wasn't counting on inheritance. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the fact that my parents sat down in a lawyer's office and wrote out a future where my name only attached to intangible things, while literally everything else was handed to my sister. For a while, I told myself to let it go. I didn't want to be the bitter sibling. Then one afternoon, I called Emily and asked if I could have Dad's old watch, the scratched up one he'd worn since I was a kid, and my mom's recipe cards. She hesitated and said, I have to see Aunt Linda and I are organizing things. We need to figure out what goes where. The kids need some keepsakes too. I said, I'm asking for a watch and some index cards, not the TV. She said, I'll see what I can do. That I'll see did something to me. I realized I wasn't just left out of the money. I was suddenly a guest in my own family's history. Somewhere along the line, my parents had quietly handed her the keys and told everyone else I should be happy with whatever scrap she passed down. I might have let it stew indefinitely if my cousin Ryan hadn't called. He's a few years older, used to live down the street from us. Now he's in another state. We hadn't talked in years. He said, hey man, I heard about the will. You okay? I did the usual. I'm fine. He said, bullshit, my dad told me some stuff before he died. Did they ever tell you about Grandma's house? I said, what house? Update, 2 weeks later. I didn't sleep much after that call. Ryan meant our dad's mother, my grandma June. She died over a decade ago. I remembered she had a little rental house near downtown. Nothing fancy. I vaguely recalled talk about selling it after she passed. I'd assumed it was long gone. Ryan said, Dad told me your dad got the house and kept it as a rental. Said he later signed it over to Emily. It didn't sound accusatory, more resigned. My old man was pissed about how it went down, but he wouldn't say anything in front of your parents. After we hung up, I pulled up the county's property search, typed in my grandma's last name, found an old deed. Grandma June to my dad, recorded the year after she died. Then another, my dad and mom to Emily and her husband as joint tenants, recorded 18 months before my mom's death. Transfer for $0. I stared at it for a long time. They'd already passed a whole house to her before they wrote that will. Quietly, no conversation with me. No heads up, just a legal transfer like I didn't exist. I called Emily the next day, asked, when did you get grandma's house? She went quiet, then said, Dad wanted us to have something secure with the kids and a mortgage. It made sense. You're in Chicago. You don't want to be a landlord here. I asked, did anyone think I might want to know that my grandma left Dad a house and he gave it to you? She said, it was their decision. I didn't want things to get weird. We're like, fair, apparently. That was strike one. Strike two was when I called Henderson and asked if there had been any previous wills. He hesitated, but eventually admitted there had been an older one from about 8 years ago, before Mom's second diagnosis. That one, he said, split everything 50-50 between me and Emily. House to be sold and proceeds divided. Savings divided. Investments divided. Same sentimental language. But the numbers were equal. I asked for a copy. He said he wasn't obligated to provide it. I reminded him my name was in it. He relented and sent a redacted version. There was my name tied to actual percentages. Then, years later, a new will cutting me out of all but metaphorical assets. I took all of that to a lawyer in Chicago. I wasn't sure what I wanted, revenge, closure, maybe just someone neutral to tell me I wasn't crazy. He went through everything and said, legally, your parents were allowed to change their minds. There's no automatic right to an inheritance for adult children. Challenging this would be expensive, ugly, and your chances are not great unless you can show they weren't of sound mind or someone exerted undue influence. I asked if the pattern of property transfers to Emily counted as undue influence. He said, maybe, but it looks more like they decided she needed help and you didn't. He asked if they'd ever helped me with a down payment or big expenses. I said no. I'd taken out my own loans, paid deposits, gotten occasional small gifts, but nothing like a house. He nodded and said, then this is less a legal issue and more a family values issue. He asked me what I actually wanted. I sat there for a while and finally said, I want to know if they ever told anyone why they did this, or if they just quietly decided I didn't count. I also want my dad's watch and my mom's recipes. He said, those last two you might be able to get without a lawsuit, and suggested I talk to the executor, Emily, one more time with clear boundaries. Before I did, I called Aunt Linda and asked to meet. She agreed. I drove down the following weekend and sat at her kitchen table with the folder printouts. I laid out the old will, the new will, the property records, and said, I know this isn't just Emily was here. Opie lives far away. I need you to stop feeding me lines about memories and tell me what really happened. Linda looked at the papers and sagged in her chair. She tried the they loved you both speech again. I cut her off. She got quiet and said, your parents were scared. When your mom got sick again, they panicked. They didn't want Emily stuck with bills and 2 kids in an old house. They thought you'd be fine. You always seemed fine. Good job. City life. No kids. They decided Emily needed the safety net more. I asked, so fine equals disposable? She winced, said, it wasn't like that. They talked about how you were independent. They said you didn't need them the way Emily did. I asked her, did they ever ask me? Did they ever say, hey, we're thinking of leaving everything to your sister because we assume you're okay? She had no answer. On my way back to Chicago, I pulled over at a rest stop and finally let myself get properly angry. Not at Emily for being there, not at myself for leaving, but the fact that somewhere in some law office and some kitchen conversations, my parents had sat around and ranked us, decided that one kid deserved financial security and the other deserved pride and memories, and then expected everyone to pretend it was normal. I texted Emily and asked her to talk on the phone that night. She agreed. We ended up on a video call. She looked exhausted, dark circles, kids yelling in the background. I laid it out plainly. Grandma's rental, the old will, the new one, Aunt Linda's version. I said, you don't get to keep acting like this is some mystery. You knew about the house. You signed the deed. You knew there was more going on. She started crying, said she'd felt guilty since the will reading, that she hadn't asked for any of it. I said, we didn't have to ask for it. You accepted it. You took a whole house and a whole inheritance and didn't once say, hey, what about my brother? She said, Mom was dying. Dad was falling apart. They were terrified. They kept saying, he'll be fine. He's always been fine. And I believed them. I didn't want to rock the boat. I didn't want to fight with them when they were sick. I told her, I get that you were in survival mode. I really do. But now they're gone, and I'm the one left with a message they wrote down about me. You might not have written it, but you benefited from it. You can't pretend you didn't. We went back and forth for a long time. her trying to balance her guilt with defensiveness, me trying not to scream into my phone. Finally, I told her I wasn't going to contest the will, I wasn't going to drag us through court, but I also wasn't going to keep playing along with the story that this was just about geography and grandkids. I ended our call by saying, I want Dad's watch and Mom's recipes. If you can't even give me that, then that's my answer about what kind of sister you are. She said she'd put them in the mail. I said, good, and hung up. Final update, 1 month later. The watch and recipe card arrived in a padded envelope a week later. No note, just the items wrapped in paper. The watch was exactly as I remembered, scratched crystal, worn leather band, still faintly smells like his aftershave. The recipes were in Mom's messy handwriting, stained with old sauce splatters. It hurt and helped at the same time. I thought that might be the end of it. Low contact, holidays apart, everyone quietly pretending the will was an awkward but understandable choice. Then I got a call from Ryan again. He said, so, funny story, I saw Aunt Linda at church, and she basically used the entire coffee hour to talk about you. I braced myself. Ryan said, she told people you were making a big deal about nothing and obsessed with money. And then someone asked her why your parents left everything to Emily. According to Ryan, one of the older ladies who'd known my grandparents said something like, I thought June always wanted things even between the boys, referencing my grandma, wanting her sons to share equally. Then another person chimed in about how they'd heard my parents say for years that they were proud of both kids and everything will be fair when we're gone. Linda apparently fumbled and said, well, plans change, and when pressed further, blurted out, they couldn't leave him anything big. Not after what happened with the loan. The second Ryan said that, I felt my whole body go cold. What loan? I asked. He said, that's what I asked her. She realized she screwed up and backpedaled. Tried to wave it off, but she said enough, something about your parents co-signing on a loan for you and getting burned. I told him they'd never co-signed anything for me, ever. I'd taken out my own federal student loans, rented apartments in my own name, financed my car alone. I racked my brain trying to remember any situation where they could have been on the hook for me and came up empty. After we hung up, I dug through my own paperwork, old emails, credit reports. Nothing, no cosign anything. Then on a hunch, I pulled my free credit report again and went line by line. There was a closed auto loan from 8 years ago in my hometown, paid off, never late, but the borrower name was Emily, maiden name, married name, with my parents as co-signers. My name was nowhere on it. I called Linda, didn't bother with small talk, asked straight out, what loan did you tell people my parents got burned on? She sputtered, said she misspoke, that she must have gotten stories mixed up. I pressed harder, asked, did Mom and Dad ever lose money because of me? Did I ever default on anything? Because I would really love to know if there's a secret version of my life I haven't been told about. Eventually, she admitted the truth in bits and pieces. It wasn't me. It was Emily's husband. Years ago, before their second kid, they'd gone to my parents for help with the car loan after his credit took a hit from some unpaid bills. My parents co-signed. He missed several payments. My dad had to step in and cover them to keep the car from being repossessed. It caused a big fight. My dad said, this is why you don't co-sign. My mom cried. They eventually paid the car off, but it left a bad taste. And apparently, that became the story they told themselves to justify everything. They convinced themselves that helping had gone wrong once, so they couldn't risk helping me later. They took the mistake Emily's husband made and folded it into some weird narrative where I was the one who might fail them. They used a loan I had nothing to do with as a reason to cut me out. Because of the car debacle, they quietly told Aunt Linda and a few others, we can't trust loans, we can't trust promises, we have to be careful. We already got burned once, we have to protect Emily and the kids. Over time, the story got simplified in people's heads till we can't leave Opie anything big. He'll just mess it up, even though I had never defaulted on anything in my life. That's what they were hiding from me. Not just that they'd favor my sister, but that they'd use my brother-in-law's screw-up as the emotional justification for treating me like a risk on paper. They didn't have the courage to say it to my face while they were alive, but they had the courage to put it in ink in a will. I sat with that for a few days, let it burn and cool. Then I wrote one last email to Emily. I told her what I knew now, that our parents had told people they couldn't leave me anything big because of a loan I never took out, that they'd used her husband's past irresponsibility as the story they told themselves when they cut me out. I wrote, they punished me for his mistakes and protected you from the fallout by shifting the narrative onto me. You benefited from it. Maybe not on purpose, but you did. I said I wasn't writing to demand money. The ship had sailed. I was writing to draw a line. From this point forward, I will not sit in rooms where people talk about how I didn't need anything or how it just made sense that you got everything. If you want a relationship with me, it has to be built on the truth of what happened, not the story that makes everyone else feel comfortable. She called me that night, sobbing, said she hadn't known about the way our parents framed the loan situation, that she never knew they'd used it as an excuse with the family. She admitted she knew about the car, had always felt guilty about it, but thought they'd forgiven them. She said, if I had known they were using that to justify cutting you out, I cut in gently. You still signed the deed to Grandma's house. You still accepted the will. You didn't make this mess, but you walked through the door it opened for you. She didn't argue, just cried and said, I don't know how to fix this. I told her, you can't fix what Mom and Dad did, but you can stop pretending it's some noble sacrifice they made and call it what it was. A choice, one that hurt me, one that helped you. If you can do that, maybe we can have something going forward. If you can't, then I don't see a way we talk about anything deeper than the weather and your kids' school plays. As for Aunt Linda, I told her I was done letting her guilt trip me about memories. I said, the next time you feel like telling people I made a big deal over nothing, remember you were the one who slipped up and told the truth about the loan. You don't get to hide behind family harmony anymore. I haven't blocked anyone, but I've moved them all to a different part of my mind. The part labeled people I keep at arm's length. I have my dad's watch on my dresser, Mom's recipes scanned and saved. When I cook her lasagna, it's because I want to remember her, not because I forgive everything she and my dad decided in those offices and kitchens. My parents wanted me to be happy with memories, while they quietly rewrote the story of who was trustworthy and who deserved backing. They left my name in the will, so they could tell themselves they'd included me, then attached it to nothing that actually costs anything. They were hiding more than assets. They were hiding the story they told about me to feel better about choosing my sister over me. Now I know that story, and I don't have to live under it. They made their choices. I've made mine. I'm not happy with memories, but I'm happy I'm not in the dark anymore.